Finally, the day of the wedding arrived. My father's priests, as well as the ones King Dashrath had brought, had interpreted the heavenly signs and discovered that by great good fortune, for a brief while, the auspicious Lagna of Karkataka would reign in the skies. Says Vasishta, Dasharath's guru declared that the exchange of garlands between the brides and grooms need to take place at that time because couple united under these stars never suffered the sorrow of separation. All was readied in accordance. The four brothers waited on one side of the hall where once Shiva's bow had lain. We sisters waited on the other side. But as the priest held up the aruni with which to light the sacred fire, a man appeared in the hall. There was an ethereal moonlit glow about him. My father asked who he was, but he did not reply. Instead, he began to dance. The musicians in the hall struck up with a melody to accompany him, though later they would have no recollection of what they had played. It lodged deep inside us music such as we had never heard before. The stranger twirled and bowed and leaped into the air, an unearthly grace in his gestures. None could take their eyes off him. None knew for how long he danced. We only knew that when the performance ended, we found ourselves breathless. As suddenly as he had come, the dancer was gone. My father questioned the guards and doorkeepers, but no one had seen him leave. The priests hurried to light the wedding fire, but it was already too late. The auspicious Lagna had passed. Vasishta surmised that this was the doing of the gods. Perhaps the dancer was a god himself. But why would the heavenly ones wish our children ill? My father cried in dismay. Haven't we propitiated them with ample offerings? I could see that Dashrath was even more upset than my father, though he said nothing. Vasishta shrugged. The ways of the gods are strange, hard for our limited human minds to encompass. Remember this too. Sometimes our ill luck has consequences that bless others. I didn't disbelieve him, but I was troubled. It was unfair that one person should suffer in order for others to be blessed. If the gods were powerful enough to shape our destinies, why couldn't they just send us good fortunes untainted by sorrow? My first unpleasant surprise came as we were about to depart for Ayodhya. My mother had planned for our nursemaid Malini to accompany Urmila and myself to Ayodhya to help us settle into our new home. Mandavi and Shrutkirti had also brought their personal serving women from home, but King Dashrath had surprised us all by announcing that he had retainers personally chosen by him for each of his daughters in law. Now you are Princess of Ayodhya, he said. It is only proper that you should be served by your own people. Urmila had been distraught while Malini wept silently into her sari. I, too, was upset. We had been counting on Malini, a good natured woman who did not take things too seriously, to provide comfort and counsel when we were homesick, to laugh away imagined demons as she had done throughout our childhoods. I was additionally troubled by the high handed way in which Dashrath made his decision, not taking into account who might be hurt by it or what we wanted. My mother tried to reason with Dashrath. Let Malini be with them for a few days, she said. You can send her back to Mithila once the girls settle in. But the king refused, though he was polite about it, and called for the palanquins. It is time we started on our journey back, he said. When the first set of bearers rushed up with my palanquin, I was astonished because I had never seen one this regal or ostentatious. Its panels were decorated in gold and inlaid with ivory. The curtains covering its doors were made of a shimmery cloth that would allow me to look out without being seen. It was laden with silken bolsters and frothy quilts and was larger than the bed I was leaving behind in the palace of my parents. The palace of my parents, I thought with a pang. Having been given away in marriage to the house of Raghu, I could no longer call it mine. Could I please have Urmila share my palanquin on the way to Ayodhya? I asked Dasrath. I was not sure how many opportunities I would have to speak privately with my sister once we reached our new home. Marveling at wonders and laughing at follies together as we travelled would help us deal with our disappointment at not having Malini with us. Additionally, I longed to know if being a wife felt as wonderful and magical to her as it did to me. Dashrath looked scandalized at my request. No need of sharing, my child, he said. I made sure to bring palanquins for each of my daughters in law so you can all travel in the comfort that befits your position. Please, father, I said, having my sister beside me on this journey would give me more comfort than. But Dashrath shook his head firmly. No, my dear, that is not appropriate. What will people think? I started to argue further, but my mother pressed my arm hard, a warning to let the matter go. Choose your battles, her stern grip seemed to say. This is not the time. She was right. The cavalcade was lined up, ready to leave for Ayodhya, horses neighing and stomping, servants loading food and drink into carts, priests sprinkling holy rice, praying for safe journey. I bit back my words, but I promised myself that once I was settled in Ayodhya, I would make sure that King Dashrath did not dictate my life. Before we left, my mother managed to pull us apart for a brief private goodbye. Urmila hugged her tightly, weeping. We are going so far away. We will be so alone. Why won't father in law let Malini come with us? It is not fair. It is not right. Her anxiety was contagious. I too felt my eyes fill with tears. But instead of consoling us, my mother spoke sternly. Pull yourselves together. Surely I have brought you up better than this. We come into the world alone and we leave it alone. And in between, too, if it is distant, we'll be alone. Draw on your inner strength. Remember, you can be your own worst enemy or your best friend. It is up to you. And also, this what you can't change, you must endure. Urmila continued weeping, but I stopped and stared at my mother. She stood tall and regal, suddenly unfamiliar, like a queen out of a tale, and looked at me gravely. I knew it was mostly to me that she had spoken. Endure. A word solid as a tree trunk. A good word upon which to build a life. I thought. I would learn it and it would help me through dark times. The swaying of the palanquin, along with the rhythmic chant of its bearers, threatened to put me in a trance, but I resisted valiantly. I did not want to miss a single moment of my journey. Who knew if I would ever embark on another one as long or as adventurous? Most women from princely families, my mother included, did not stray far from their husbands' palaces once they were married, and Ayodhya seemed like a land with many more rules and restrictions than Mithila. Though I still smarted from my father in law's high handed treatment, I had to admit that traveling alone had certain compensations. Urmila would have kept me occupied with jokes about the wedding. She would have prevailed upon me to curl up with her under the quilt and sleep, warning me that otherwise I would look haggard and ugly by the time I arrived in Ayodhya, where our mothers in law were waiting to evaluate the wives their sons were bringing home. Now, in my solitude, I would be able to watch the forest stretching on either side of me to infinity. I had heard my father's huntsmen talk about the wildlife that inhabited the forest, gazelles and bears and talking monkeys. I did not believe monkeys could talk, but if they did, I hoped I would see one. Who knew, maybe I might even come across a stray Rakshasa or two. But my hopes were soon dashed. Our procession was headed by enthusiastic heralds that blew on horns and beat on drums, frightening away all wildlife. Worse, the 1,000 soldiers that Dashrath had brought with him flanked both sides of the road, stomping and shouting, slashing back the undergrowth and lopping off branches and vines, even those that didn't intrude on our path, with a vigor that made me feel ill. After a while, I could not stand it any longer and called to one of the horsemen who rode by my side as my special guard. It was on the tip of my tongue to summon the commander of the army, but I kept in mind my mother's advice and requested instead that he carry to Ram the message that his wife humbly requested to see him. In a little while, I could see my husband, that dazzling, looming word I was not used to yet, riding towards me. His rapid hoofbeats matched the speeding of rhythm of my heart. In this jewel crusted princess attire, wearing a rather official looking coronet, Ram seemed very different from the young man in our temple garden with his lithe and dusty grace. But his eyes were the same, fleckled with that ancient recognition. At this moment, they were also concerned. Are you well, my princess? He asked, moving the palanquin curtains aside to grasp my hand, not caring who saw him. Is the motion of the palanquin causing you discomfort? This is a dangerous part of the forest, but once we have crossed it, I can request my royal father to stop at one of the hermitages that lie beyond. I was distracted by the warm pressure of his hand. At our wedding, after the exchange of garlands, he had held my hand just like this and shocked everyone by vowing aloud that he would never marry again. Sita will be my only consort and beloved all the days of my life. The words had hummed inside me like honeybees. I had not expected such a gift that my husband would be mine alone. The hall had filled with murmurs as people discussed such a vow, unprecedented in a prince. My father looked delighted. Dashrath was clearly displeased. No doubt he had hoped for many more valuable marital alliances for his heir, but he controlled himself and inclined his head in gracious acceptance of his son's impractical wish. I pushed away the memory and assured him that I was well. The only thing distressing me was the callous behavior of the soldiers. Could he order them not to harm the trees? This is their home and we are visitors, I added. We should treat them with courtesy and not cause them needless pain. Ram's brows drew together in surprise. Clearly, he had never considered that plants feel pain as we do, but he inclined his head. You are tender hearted, my dear. I can't fault that. It is right and necessary that women should be so. I wanted to ask him, wasn't it as important for a king to feel the hurt of others as women did? Wasn't he responsible for the animals and birds and trees in his realm as well as the people? Who would protect them if he did not. But already I was learning that I had to carefully choose the time and place for frank talk. Ram beckoned to a nearby soldier and said something. The man took off at a run to inform the commander of the prince's strange order. I guessed. Ram bowed to me and said, "Now I must return to my father's side." Ram's horse neighed impatiently. No doubt he sensed my husband's desire to be back as was proper with his father. I smiled at Ram and spoke the ceremonial appropriate words of thanks and farewell. There would be opportunity enough for ethical discourse regarding the duties of a king and who he was supposed to protect. After all, we were going to be together for the rest of our lives. My palanquin made its way through the forest in relative quiet now, giving me a chance to observe the many kinds of greens around me, in places shot through with sunshine, in places deepened by shadows, or punctured by the bright exclamation of flowers. I watched them longingly. I wanted to climb out and run my hands over bark and stem, smell the sap. I wanted to walk barefoot through the tickle of grass, find bird nests and fox lairs, and rare and precious healing herbs. But such things were not allowed to princes, especially those married into the royal family of Ayodhya. Still, it was a small thing to set against all the happiness I was carrying in my heart. My thoughts swung back to the wedding. After his vow, Ram had kept my hand in his as though he would never let go. From time to time, as the priests chanted countless prayers for peace, prosperity, and progeny, I stole a look at his face. Though it was appropriately solemn, there was a smile in his eyes. Did it indicate that nothing was worth taking too seriously? That even the longest ceremony would come to an end? Now, as the jogging of the palanquin bearers lulled me into a half sleep, the dream I fell into was partly a memory and partly a vision. We had just set out from Mithila after the wedding amid music and dance and the joyful tears of the citizens who had come to bid their princess goodbye. Suddenly, a huge thunderclap startled everyone into silence. Surging dust blinded us, and when we could see again, a man blocked our path, his matted locks dancing like serpents. The rays in his face was a fire. In his left hand, he carried an enormous bow, in his right, an axe. When I saw that axe, its blade still rushed red from the blood of long dead royalty. I knew him, the sage Parashuram, who had long ago brought us Shiva's bow. My heart sank. Who among you had the audacity to break my lord's bow? He bellowed. I am here to pay you back for the insolence. 21 times I rid the earth of the evil of Kshatriyas. Perhaps it is time to do it again. Lakshman, who was as usual next to Ram, took an angry step forward, his hand on the hilt of his sword. Ram and Lakshman were not born when you killed those kings, says. Perhaps you might not find it so easy to destroy the Kshatriya race this time. A horrified Dashrath rushed forward, hands joined imploringly. Pay no attention to Lakshman, great Rishi. He is just a hot headed boy, doesn't know what he is saying. And please forgive Ram. I don't know how he broke the bow. It must have been an accident. Certainly, he didn't mean any harm. I will do anything you want in reparation. The words had no effect on Parshuram, who gripped his axe and swung it up, ready to bring it down full force on Ram's skull. I stepped in front of Ram. It was not an act of courage. Until it happened, I didn't even know I was going to do it. Wherever the impulse had come from, it certainly was not my conscious mind. I realized right away that it was a thoroughly stupid move. I had no power over the enraged sage. It would probably kill us both with the same blow. A little part of my mind said, that is all right. It would be better than living on alone if he killed Ram. My move had frozen the entire assembly into shocked silence. Parshuram was the first to recover from it. Little Sita, he said in a tone of wonder, staring at me, letting his axe arm drop to his side. The girl for whom Shiva sent his bow down to earth, is it really you? Ram moved me aside gently and addressed the sage. He spoke with respect, but as though to an equal. The bow broke because its job was done, and so is yours, says. Go back to your austerities. That is your duty now. For a moment, there was a strange look of recognition on Parshuram's face. Then it darkened with rage again. He shook the bow he was holding. So, you think you can tell me what to do? You pipsqueak? Let us see you string this bow then. It is the pair to Shiva's bow. This one belonged to Vishnu and was given to my father for safekeeping. If you can string this bow, I will let you go. If not, he shook his axe menacingly. Give me the arrow too, says. Ram interrupted. Parshuram thrust both at him. Ram smiled at the bow, a smile of familiarity it seemed. Then, in a motion so swift that I almost didn't see it occur, he strung it, set the arrow to it, and pointed it at the sage. He said, Vishnu's bow can't be drawn in vain. What shall I use the arrow for, Parshuram? For a moment, Parshuram looked stunned, as much at being called familiarly by his name as by the arrow pointing at him. Then he knelt in front of Ram and said, I recognize you now, self of myself, and your divine consort as well. Use the arrow to take from me all my powers, for you will need them. And it seemed to me, but perhaps I imagined it, for no one else mentioned it later, that a brilliant light shot forth from his chest and entered my husband's body. I awoke to the touch of an unfamiliar hand on my arm, a voice whispering apologies. I struggled up, startled, but it was only my new serving woman. In a heavy Koshali accent that was hard to decipher, she informed me that we would be in Ayodhya soon. Would I like to clean up? The palanquin bearers had stopped to rest. I stepped out, stretched my stiff limbs, shook out the folds of my sari, and washed my face in the scented water the woman poured for me. I combed my hair and, as best as I could in the lowering dark, refreshed the sindoor on my forehead. I hoped I would make a good impression on my mothers in law. Look, the Koshali woman said. We were on a hillock. Ahead of us lay a huge city stretching beyond the limits of my sight. Ayodhya, my new home. I didn't hope to love it the way I had loved Mithila. The land of our childhood is a special place where we are cherished without question or expectation. But I was determined to do my duty by it. Duty. The word brought an ironic smile to my face. Already, Ram's ideas were influencing me. As I watched, dots of light flickered to life all over the city. The people are lighting lamps to welcome you, my maid explained. The lights twinkled in the balmy evening as though a cosmic hunter had caught the stars in his net and brought them down to earth to greet me. The sound of a flute rose from somewhere, deepening the magic of the scene. I will always remember this, I thought, and was surprised at the sudden, powerful connection I felt to this land. I will be a good princess for you, I promised Ayodhya silently, and when time comes, a good queen. I will guard you and bring prosperity to you the way only a woman can. If needed, I will sacrifice my life for you and my happiness. A wind rose around me from where I didn't know. It was unexpectedly cold and made me shiver. Sacrifice, sacrifice, whispered the trees, carrying my promise across the valley. Thanks for listening. Now, some word power. As suddenly as he had come, the dancer was gone. My father questioned the guards and doorkeepers, but no one had seen him leave. The priests hurried to light the wedding fire, but it was already too late. The auspicious Lagna had passed. Vasishta surmised that this was the doing of the gods. Perhaps the dancer was a god himself. Surmise, surmise means guess, deduce. Surmise means conjecture. But why would the heavenly ones wish our children ill? My father cried in dismay. Haven't we propitiated them with ample offerings? Propitiate, propitiate means pacify, appease, to gain goodwill or favor of. Vashishta shrugged. The ways of the gods are strange, hard for our little human minds to encompass. ENCOMPASS, encompass means comprehend. Urmila had been distraught while Malini wept silently into her sari. DISTRAUGHT, distraught means very worried and upset. I was additionally troubled by the high handed way in which Dashrath made his decision. High handedness means the use of power or authority in a way that is more forceful than is needed without thinking about the feelings or wishes of other people. The palanquin was laden with silken bolsters and frothy quilts and was larger than the bed I was leaving behind in the palace of my parents. The palace of my parents, I thought with a pang. PANG, pang means a sudden sharp pain. Dashrath looked scandalized at my request. SCANDALAZE, scandalize means shock or horrify someone by violating of propriety. The cavalcade was lined up, ready to leave for Ayodhya, horse neighing and stomping, servants loading food and drink to carts, priests sprinkling holy rice, paying for a safe journey. CAVALCADA, cavalcade means procession. Horses neighing and stomping. STOMP, stomp means tread heavily and noisily. Stomp means to walk with intentionally heavy steps. I beat back my words, but I promised myself that once I was settled in Ayodhya, I would make sure that King Dashrath did not dictate my life. Beat back one's words means to stop yourself from saying something or expressing an emotion. Urmila continued weeping, but I stopped and stared at my mother. She stood tall and regal, suddenly unfamiliar, like a queen out of a tale, and looked at me gravely. I knew it was mostly to me that she had spoken. Endure. ENDURE, endure means suffer something painful or difficult patiently. Ram seemed very different from the young man in our temple garden with his lithe and dusty grace. LITHE, lithe means young, healthy, attractive, and agile. A horrified Dashrath rushed forward, hands joined imploringly. Pay no attention to Lakshman, great Rishi. He is just a hot headed boy. Doesn't know what he is saying. And please forgive Ram. I don't know how he broke the bow. It must have been an accident. Certainly, he didn't mean any harm. I will do anything you want in reparation. REPARATION, reparation means compensation, amendment. Who among you had the audacity to break my lord's bow? He bellowed. I am here to pay you back for the insolence. INSOLENCE, insolence means impertinent, impudence, rude behavior that does not show respect. So, you think you can tell me what to do? You pipsqueak? PIPSQUEAK, pipsqueak means insignificant person. Pipsqueak means nobody. Thanks for listening.